because the wind from the explosion continues to push it. These tools use the technology where the fuel's up in here, okay, or a powder load in a powder tool, okay? When the fuel explodes, there's a piston in this tool, okay? Call it a fancy hammer, if you will, okay? The hammer, or the piston, drives the fastener out of the tool. Do I have some fasteners? Julie, can you pass them around? I don't have any fasteners right here in front of me unless some back there. But the fastener is going to come out having been hit by the hammer. If you consider for a moment, if I take a piece of sheetrock, thank you. If I take a piece, and this is one of those clips, I put it in there. If I go up to a drywall wall, okay, there's a piece of drywall or sheetrock on each side of the stud. If I put this up against the wall and make a fastening, okay, with all the power that any of the tools have, it's no different than if I took a full swing with a baseball bat, okay? Because I'm going to hit the fastener, and it's probably going to dent the one piece of sheetrock, but it's not even going to, make a notch in the backside of the other piece of sheetrock. If you follow what I'm saying. So basically, the piston stays inside here. It might come out just like a fraction of an inch, but that's basically where it stays. It's a fancy hammer. That's what we've got here. But nevertheless, you don't want to shoot it into your palm, and that's probably the most important thing that I can tell you today. Outside of that, it's a tool that can bring you a whole lot of labor savings if you think about all the places you can do it. And that's where I want to move to next, is take a closer peek at what's available to you on page 28 and 29. One of the most popular products, like I said, is the ceiling clip, for your Code 300 drops, okay? One-hole straps are right there with it. If you see the top of page 28, you see two part numbers there with that little clip. The 14 threaded rod hanger, TRH, threaded rod hanger, okay, MP034, okay, which is mechanical pin 034 for 3/4 inch. It actually means something, okay? And then you've got 38 threaded rod hanger. That stands for 3/8. The one above it for 1/4 inch threaded rod hanger. So essentially, if you have some drops where you're using threaded rod of whatever the application is, with 1/4 inch or 3/8 rod, you can just shoot it up, okay? And if you have it on the pole, you can even put your threaded rod on the clip before you shoot it up. How cool is that, okay? Think about that for a second. That's an application that you probably didn't think of. You got the conduit clamps. Do you guys use conduit clamps? Raise your hands. Okay. Mostly one-hole straps? Okay. So basically that's that. One of the things that most people don't know we have at the top of page 29 is our tie strap holder. Think about temporary lighting. Zip tying those babies. Just go right down the hallway of any given building, shoot those up. And when you're done, you cut off your tie straps to your temporary lighting, and you got a nice flush little fastener up there. Guys, do that. Make those attachments 100 different ways, and this makes it a whole lot easier for you. Okay. The washer pin underneath that, and a variety of ways to do it. We have a 1/2 inch pin, a 3/4 inch pin. You see the third one down. It says MO34BB. The BB is a very scientific designation that stands for bunker buster. Okay. If you've got very hard concrete, okay, some really hard precast, the bunker buster pin is the way to go. Okay. So if you ever have a problem on a job site where the fasteners aren't working, if there's one thing we can do at Ramset is be a consultant for you. Call us. We have a technical service line, or you can talk to one of our salesmen, and we can get out there and we can try out different fasteners until we can find out the best one and the quickest one for you to be able to get your job done. Okay? Underneath that, we got threaded studs. Now, how often in some industrial environments do you want a temporary fastening? When you shoot our fasteners into concrete and steel, they are a somewhat permanent fastener. If you try to pry them out with a pry bar of some sort in concrete, you're probably going to make a big pothole, okay? Because what you've done is it kind of glues in there. I can tell you how that works, but basically it fuses into the lime of the concrete. So when you pry it out, it takes concrete with it. And when you see the fastener, after a failed fastener or after a failed fastening, the concrete is actually glued to the shank of the fastener. It's pretty cool, actually. And when you shoot into steel, consider structural steel has a memory. I didn't drill a hole and make room for the fastener to go in, okay? I moved structural steel aside for the fastener to go into that. If it doesn't go in deep enough, the structural steel wants to pinch that point back out. Okay, so you want to make sure you go into the structural steel at least, you know, 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch if you can, with a 1/2 inch long fastener. That way, it won't get pinched out. Any questions so far? Okay, but basically for light duty fastenings, for what you do, these 3/4 inch long fasteners are plenty enough. And then the top hat pins that you see there, those are available. You just plug those, you know, one at a time right into the single shot tool, and basically you can just, you know, shoot up all kinds of 4 squares and whatever else you have, you know, make up whatever you want to fasten real quick. 10 minutes? Okay, okay. And then you see the brattle rings at the bottom of the page, and those, if you can see by the picture, those easily screw into the threaded rod that are at the top of page 28. Now, I'm not going to try to confuse this a little bit, but you can easily identify our gas pins because they have a plastic flute, we call it, a grommet, flute, whatever you want to call it, attached to the pin. It's black. Okay, that designates it as a gas pin. Why? How? What makes it different from a powder actuated pin is not just because it's black. The shank diameter is thinner. The reason it's a thinner shank pin than a powder actuated pin, okay, and a powder actuated pin here is a 145 shank diameter, 0.145, okay. Our gas fasteners are 0.1, oh, don't quote me on this, I think 1/16, okay, so it's you know, not a huge difference, but we make it a smaller shank diameter, okay, because the gas technology doesn't have as much power potentially as a powder actuated tool, okay. So frankly, so we need a thinner shank pin to get it to work. You lose a little bit of performance as a result. So if you want a little bit more performance or need a little bit more performance, you can use a powder actuated pin in my gas tool, okay? The issue is that you'll probably have to hit it a second time, okay, because it probably won't go in deep enough. So can you hit it a second time? Yes, you can, okay, to get it to go in a little deeper. Unfortunately, that's difficult to do if you're using it with the pole version of the tool, because it's hard to put the tool back over it, but in other situations, it's easy enough. Applications I can think of where you may be in a pinch, you want to use a powder actuated pin, is in some of your applications, maybe it's not as common with you, but I've seen 2x4s go up to be back in plywood to be backers for a breaker box or what have you, okay? And that breaker box, you put the 2x4s up, you can take a 2.5 inch washer pin that you would normally use with a powder actuated tool, and just hit it 2 times with this, and get it out of the way. It'll make a nice fastening for you. Questions? Okay? Now, I talked a little bit about powder, and I'm going to touch on it real quick here. This is my Viper tool. This is a powder actuated tool, and what's cool about these two systems is if you need or want a powder actuated tool, this is nice and lightweight. To a certain degree, putting this on a pole, if this is, believe it or not, if you haven't held this tool, I encourage you to come up and make some fastenings with it. But this tool, okay, is a little bit like, it's 6.5 pounds, I think, if memory serves. It's a little bit like putting a bowling ball on a toothpick, okay? Where this is like 4 pounds, so it's a little bit lighter and easier. And if you put it on a 12-foot pole and you gotta raise it up, it's a little bit easier to handle, okay? And this was made for the acoustical contractor when he's shooting up all the ceiling clips all day long. Now, some of you guys on some of your jobs, you might have subbed out that part to have the acoustical guys put in your corners for code 300. But in the case of most of the guys, this is a very popular tool with electricians. Needs a license, okay? A little bit lightweight to use, okay? But one of the things, if you go back and forth, this pole is the same pole that you use with the T3 cup. So if you're using both, you can take off the T3 cup and use the same pole with the Viper tool, just so you know that. Okay? Let me check my notes. I know I'm forgetting something. What, I got 5 minutes left before we start shooting a little bit? Oh, okay. I kind of touched on that real quick, but don't oil it, don't do anything. What I want to explain to help you understand that better is understanding the scientific process on how this works, okay? You've got a 1-cylinder engine, essentially, okay? The fuel, the flammable gas, when I push down on the nose piece, you heard that fan start to blow, Okay, when the fan blows, what happens is when I push down on the nose piece, 2 O-rings come up, they seal off the cylinder, the fuel injection sprays a burst of fuel into the cylinder, which, by the way, it depends upon the outside temperatures how much the fuel injectors spray into there. The colder, the more fuel you need. The fan blade mixes the fuel together, okay, and when I pull the trigger, an electrical switch is depressed to allow me to pull the trigger and to get the spark plug to work. The spark plug ignites that fuel, which drives the piston down to the end of the muzzle, which drives the fastener. And because you've got cooler air outside in the atmospheric air and heated air inside the cylinder, a vacuum is formed and it pulls the piston back. You can make 2 fastenings a second if you could go that fast. So there's no delay. You can keep going. So that's how it works. Now, from a maintenance standpoint, there is nothing you can do to this tool to make that maintain any better, except for if you're on jobs that are filthy, renovation jobs where there's constantly dust in the air, and you're making a lot of fasteners, which really doesn't relate to your trade as much as it would a drywall contractor that's making potentially on one tool up to 1,000 shots a day. Okay, there is a screen or a foam insert in the top of the tool where air gets sucked in for the tool to work. As the air gets sucked in, we want to keep the dirt off the O-rings, okay? If this filter or the screen is dirty, you can take a screwdriver and pop off the top, shake it out, okay, and put it back in. You probably don't really have to worry about it. The tool is probably going to need either the piston to be dressed and the O-rings replaced before the tool even gets dirty enough to clean the filter for what you use the tool for. Any other questions?
What's the proper way to lock that piston in? I've seen it pop out a lot.
The nose piece?
No, the piston. I've seen it pop out a lot.
The piston inside the tool?
No, on the end.
Where you just changed from the magnetic tip to...
Oh, this one here? You know, there's a spring here. In fact, this one's giving me a little bit of a fit right now. This is an old tool I got from one of my salesmen. But basically, just have to get it, you know, just slam it down on the floor a little bit. And that's how, there's a square part on there, okay? The square part of the muzzle is what we call this, okay? The square part needs to be able to be towards the rear of the tool because there's a cam in there that holds it in place. So if it's coming out, it could be because your muzzle's twisted. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
We got a problem with the fuel wouldn't go in.
Okay.
And that, you know, we sprayed and it gets kind of cold. We tried other ones that wouldn't go. We let it sit. And after we let it sit, it magically went in.
Okay, now, what could have happened there is when it's fuel injected, so there's a seal here. Remember what I said when I started this conversation? Don't be afraid to push, you know, hard on it. If you don't push hard and the seal doesn't engage properly, when the fuel sprays, it's very cold. Okay, you'll get frostbite if you let a whole can of gas empty in your fingers if you hold it down. Okay, so you'll get some frost around the seal. Okay, which would be an issue for you. Okay, so I would just push it down, and I'm thinking temperature outside shouldn't really affect things. Okay.
Well, it was cold, you know, outside.
And it really shouldn't matter, okay, but there's probably some frost on the seal would be my guess in that situation.
So let it warm up or let it dissipate and then try it.
I would take it in someplace so that the frost around that seal, you know, melts, if you will, and just push hard on the fuel and you'll be all right.
Hey Chris, what about storing the tool for fuel?
The fuel should be stored just like you would for anything that's flammable, okay? Because that's what it is, okay? You should store it with all the rest of your flammables on the job site. Can you leave it in, if you put it in a job box, okay, at night with the fuel inside the tool, you're fine. You can just leave it in the tool.
Do you have any issues with those jamming similar to like a nail gun? We have issues with that a lot of times with those. Do you have any issues with that?
Not really. Occasionally, it's somewhat rare, but occasionally the piston will get stuck because there's debris in the muzzle of the tool. The piston might get stuck down in the muzzle, and you can take a Phillips screwdriver and jam it back down in there and go back to work. Anyone else?